Hello and welcome to Bread and Rosaries, the only podcast with the correct, radical theological take on Taylor Swift getting engaged. I'm Ben Molyneux-Heathington, and I'm joined today by Adam Spears. Adam, what is your theological reflection on the big Taylor news?
Fuck billionaires? I don't know.
But it's like she's getting mad to like a really big, like a big guy, like he's big dumb guy. I've never heard him speak. I'm just assuming he's an American footballer. He looks like that. I'm assuming he's a big dumb guy.
I did see something earlier that made me laugh, where it was like how to cure your obsession with pale English twinks. Get married to a bear. You know?
So it took me a minute to realise that was in reference to Taylor Swift and not your own personal. I was like, it's cool if you're into pale English twinks, but that's never been the vibe that I've got off you. Yeah, I assume that that's a reference to previous exes of Taylor Swift. The only one I know is wasn't she with Joe Alwyn, the actor, at some point?
Yeah, I think he was the one that sort of co-wrote some songs with her.
Yes, I believe so, and is also in some cool films.
Yeah, and he's definitely a pale English twink, isn't he? Really,
that sounds about right. So I'm prepared to believe. So I started with a joke, but it turns out that your knowledge of Taylor Swift is actually far, far above mine. So
I mean, it's tricky because like Taylor Swift, I'm not super keen on her. Look, she is basically the best you can expect a like liberal progressive billionaire musician to be, right? I don't think she's a monster, but she is a billionaire, flies a hell of a lot in private jets, you know, like I'm not expecting too much from her, but annoyingly some of her music, particularly later music, I quite like, you know, some of her folky stuff. I quite enjoyed that, and I kind of hate myself for it. Mostly just because of the whole billionaire thing.
Yeah, look, man, I think you've got to remember that I'm like on the record as being a fan of like Radiohead and Kanye. So like in terms of like problematic music taste, I'm like, well, yeah, whatever. She seems probably a bit shitty because she's a billionaire, but I've got to divorce that. Like
you've probably got like Chris Brown on your playlist, haven't you? Let's face it.
No, wow, no.
That's where you draw the line.
Yeah. Purely on a taste, like because obviously, like I wouldn't give Kanye West any money, like, but obviously, like it's it's a different world now. Like, you don't have to give artists money anymore, which is mostly bad, but in some cases, like listening to Kanye and watching Roman Polanski films is a very good thing. Right?
It's just I never really thought that I would have to categorize Kanye West in the same place as like Screwdriver or someone like that, you know?
Yeah, well, it's an old world we live in. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about our friends in the media. Wait, are we the media, Adam? Do we count as the media? We have a podcast. Are we the media?
I sort of tentatively describe myself as a freelance journalist whenever I write articles. So probably, I don't know.
Well, I hate journalists, so you're screwed.
That's fair. That's. I'm not a blue tick journalist, though, although nobody is these days, are they? Unless they're paying for it. You know what I mean?
But yes, we're going to talk a bit about the media and their response to the Palestine action prescription, but also more generally about how they think about things like free speech and the right to protest and the rule of law and big ideas like that. But before we talk about any of that, let's start, as we always start, with what else is on my mind grapes.
What else is on my mind grapes?
Adam, what is on your mind grapes?
The Filton 24 are on my mind grapes. They are a group of Palestine actionists who are accused of criminal damage. In fact, they've been charged with criminal damage, aggravated burglary, violent disorder. They've been accused of destroying £2 million worth of weapons at Elbit Systems in Filton in Bristol. They've been held without trial for, I think now over 9 months. And their case is quite high profile, so you may well have heard of it. Some of the stuff that they're accused of has been used as some of the like reasons that the Home Secretary has given for prescribing Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation. So one of the things that I think at least one of them is accused of is assaulting a police officer, which, if it's true, is absolutely not what Palestine Action, it's not part of their strategy, it's not what they encourage you to do, it's just not Palestine Action's, it's not part of their modus operandi. So if someone did that, and things can get heated and things can happen, right? But that's not, I don't think that makes sense to use that as an excuse to prescribe a group, even if it did happen, but we all know what the police are like, right?
Let's be honest, though. If that's a reason, then there should be no football fans left in the country, right? Like,
well, I mean, there should also just be no police left in the country,
sure,
right? If you're gonna prescribe an organisation for like violent disorder and assaulting people, well,
but if assaulting a police officer when you are part of an organisation or part of a group is enough to be prescribed, then every football fandom in the country should be prescribed, right? Like, just the actions of one person who allegedly did this is not good reason, right?
Tons of groups should be, right? And some of that stuff that we'll get onto really in this episode, I think. But anyway, that's what they're accused of. They, as I say, they've been held without trial for 9 months. Now, more recently, the Filton 24 have been reclassified by Peterborough Prison as terrorists, right? So their action took place before the prescription of Palestine Action. But since the prescription of Palestine Action, they've been reclassified within the prison system, which means that, one of them, called, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but the name that they're giving in all of the kind of media stuff, and this is coming from Cage International, who are a kind of Muslim NGO.
Yeah. They focus on civil liberty infringements around the war on terror, right? That's their...
Exactly.
So they've got plenty to be doing.
Yeah. Anyway, they report her name as T Hoxha. I don't know how to pronounce that, but I became aware of this because I have a source, let's put it that way, who knows this person. And she started a hunger strike on the 11th of August because the reclassification of the Filton 24 as terrorists meant that they were stripped away of their basic rights whilst in prison. So T Hoxha lost her library job in prison that she liked to do. She lost access to recreational classes, and she lost the right to receive mail. And she was also apparently told, obviously she'd been on hunger strike for about a week, I think, and a prison guard told her that she didn't look too bad for someone who was on hunger strike, which is just gross.
Yeah, not surprising, but gross.
Yeah, and she's been denied, apparently, welfare checks. The latest update is, I think, from yesterday, so that's day 17 of the hunger strike, and her mental and physical health are apparently depleting fast, and obviously her loved ones are really worried about her. Apparently her hair is falling out, and her jaw is in pain, and her brain fog is worsening. One good thing is that her recreational activities have been returned to her, so that's through sort of her own self-advocacy and obviously public pressure. But she obviously still doesn't have her library job, and her mail is still being withheld. I'm not sure whether it's all the mail is withheld or whether it's being censored. There seems to be sort of a mix-up in the messaging here, but either way, not good, and that is one thing that needs to be changed. Either way, yeah, the pressure has worked so far to an extent, and what they are asking people to do now is to email the healthcare department at the prison, which is hmpeterborough.admin@nhft.nhs.uk, to demand that tea is provided with electrolyte sachets, and email the governor of the prison, Ralph.Lubkowski, LUBKOWSKI at SODEXOGOV.co.uk. And obviously we will include these in the show notes. And call HMP Peterborough on 01733 500. But make sure that before you do that, add 141 to the start of the number so that you can withhold your number, because you know what these bastards are like. That line is open 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Every day. So yeah, give them a call, spam them with calls. Don't let this sort of worsen to the point where she's really, really in trouble. It obviously it's an absolute travesty of justice that these people are in prison in the first place, let alone this. Hi folks, it's Adam from the editing booth here. I just wanted to give you a more recent update concerning T Hoxha, because obviously the nature of this is that it changes day by day, hour by hour. So I'm reading here from the Cage International Instagram page. You can follow them at Cage International, and I really encourage you to do so. So it says, urgent, hunger striking activist T Hoxha in critical condition. T Hoxha, a Palestine activist and one of the Filton 24, is on her 19th day of hunger strike. She is imprisoned for standing against the genocide in Gaza. The prison has repeatedly tried to force T to sign a waiver, absolving them of responsibility should anything happen to her. She has refused. Her safety and well-being remain the prison's responsibility. Take action now. Email the prison today and demand T is transferred to a hospital for independent health monitoring. The email is ralph.lukowski@sodexogov.co.uk. Call the prison 01733 217 500 and insist she is taken to a hospital, not the prison medical wing. Obviously, this is an ongoing situation. It's changing all the time, and we really encourage you to take those actions. We will be doing likewise. And as always, our prayers and solidarity with T and all people imprisoned for their solidarity with Palestine, and of course for the Palestinian people themselves.
And I think it's worth noting, on one level, I'm almost reluctant to say this because it shouldn't really matter, but I think it does. People will be impacted by being reminded that this person has been found guilty of nothing in a court of law. There has been no trial. They are on remand, awaiting trial. They have been for 9 months. That is, it would be appalling if it happened to someone who was guilty of something, right?
Yeah.
But actually, in this case, it's someone who has not been found guilty. And as we are likely to discuss later, there is every chance that they will not be found guilty when it comes before a jury. So, yeah, it's not... In some ways, it doesn't matter. No prisoner should be treated this way, but this is someone who has yet to actually be sentenced for a crime. Yeah,
I mean, the thing is, the judicial system is not built really on any sense of morality. It's built to uphold the state, right? And the biggest problem, according to the state, with what these people have done is that they've attacked a company that is making money, that is operating legally as far as the state is concerned and providing jobs and that kind of thing. So any attack on a company like that is going to effectively be seen as an attack on the state, and they're not going to like that. So yeah, I mean, obviously I'm getting a bit anarchist about this because, that is my want, but the law it's pretty obvious is not actually that concerned with the morality of these things, which is why this kind of situation happens. One more thing I will say is, the top tips on this are apparently obviously dial 141 to withhold your number, but also record your call so that they can be held accountable later on. But yeah, we really encourage people to do that. As I say, this will all be in the show notes. Click links, get your phone out, send an email, and just click on Cage International, the link in the show notes there as well, because there'll be like a form letter you can do if you don't really have much time as well.
And, at the risk of playing the Christian card too heavily, I think Christ was pretty explicit about how you should treat people in prison, right? Like, actually, if you're a Christian, this is a person in which you should see the face of Christ. And if you deny that, you deny the gospel. So, even if you think this person is guilty, first of all, don't be so stupid. But but even if you think they should be in prison, then still the gospel is very clear about how you're meant to treat that person.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I was in prison and you didn't visit me. Therefore, right. Hell.
Yeah. So unless you do as we ask, you are going to hell. Yeah, and that's true of anything we say on this podcast, if that wasn't already clear.
Yeah. Thus saith bread and rosaries.
So let's move on to our main topic, which is linked. And I want to start by telling you, Adam, that I hung out with a terrorist this weekend.
Did you? What kind of terrorist?
The scariest kind of terrorist. Priest in the Church of England terrorist.
Oh, the worst.
So I was at the Christian Festival Greenbelt over the weekend.
I was going to ask you how that went. Yeah, whilst you've been in Greenbelt, I've been in Bleeding Hospital. So, but... Yeah. So our weekends have contrasted somewhat, but yes. I wanted to know because I wanted to go to Greenbelt, but yeah.
So on the Sunday communion service, which because I'm a heathen heretic, I don't go to because it's a good time to get a shower. But the Sunday communion service, some portion of it was taken by the Reverend Sue Parfitt, who you may know for being one of the first women to be ordained in the Church of England, and you may also know for being a filthy terrorist lover.
Well, arguably a terrorist herself.
Yes. So she was the elderly priest that was arrested during the Defend Our Juries protests for supporting Palestine action. In the service, she apparently said that there were terrorist papers waiting for her when she got home. So your communion service this morning is being taken by a terrorist. Which is really fantastic. But then even better, one of the last things I did at Greenbelt, quite late at night, was a kind of a big sing-along. They have a band and they play a bunch of well-known songs and hand out lyrics and everyone sings along.
Is that the beer thing?
No, not beer and hymns. These are non-Christian songs. This is just
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
She was sat in the second row, 80-something years old, which we found out when they played My Generation, and they were doing this thing where they got different generations to sing the song. And they're like, if you're one in the 80s, you're one in the 90s, whatever. And they get into the song, and this voice just goes, "You didn't say if you were born in the 40s." And it's this woman sat second row of the thing, and so the whole tent obviously erupts chanting "Sue, Sue, 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 Sue." But she was obviously going to get the most out of her weekend away before she went back to face terrorist charges. And the reason I bring up Sue Parfitt, apart from the fact that she's a bloody legend, is that she has been the source of a great deal of sympathy from our media, right? And the vibe has been, well, paint these people as terrorists if you like, but you can't go around arresting elderly female priests. That's a bad look, and that sort of thing's not really on, is it? From the sort of people that probably would have no interest in defending T Hoxha, who we've just talked about, but because Sue Parfitt is a priest and an older woman, she gets a lot of basically, why are you arresting nanas for holding placards? And on one level, our answer is it's pretty fucked up that they're arresting people in their 80s who are just holding placards. But on another level, actually, is it less fucked up if it's healthy 20-somethings being arrested for holding up placards? Does it matter really that it's an elderly female priest that's being arrested, or is there more of a principle at play there?
It's something that we probably need to use to our advantage to some extent, but also there's certainly a level of hypocrisy there. And look, maybe hypocrisy isn't necessarily the kind of gotcha that we sometimes like to think it is.
We're all hypocrites.
You know what? Yeah. Yeah.
I know how fucked up it is to eat animals and like drink milk and eat eggs, and I still do it every day, pretty much, right? Like we're all hypocrites to some extent or other.
You do it to such an extent that I would not be surprised if you like punched your own meal to death, frankly. So
I really don't. I object to this. I am quite a light meat eater as it goes.
Sure,
but I do love cheese, so you're probably right.
But yeah, no, I mean, look, as I say, we're going to get into some of this, but this is what we're talking about largely here is optics. And actually optics doesn't really get to the heart of an issue.
No, absolutely not. And I think there's been a change in the media. I think the media writ large has realised increasingly that the tide is turning on Israel and their actions in the Gaza Strip, that public opinion has swung massively against an ongoing genocide, turns out isn't hugely popular with the public at large, and that they can't carry on being quite as aggressively running cover for what's happening.
You're absolutely right, but this is not just a media thing. This is a sort of more traditionally kind of political thing as well. What's incredible is we have seen, and it probably started just under a month ago, I think, where, yeah, the thinking on this started to shift a little bit. The political approach on it started to shift a little bit. Not to the point where we're actually going to like cut off relations with Israel or anything like that.
Well, no, that would be helpful. That would do that.
Right,
exactly.
that
would do something, so fuck that, yeah.
Exactly. But like, there's been a shift in the rhetoric that the government is using and that politicians are using. And what it is the government has changed its rhetoric, partly in response to Donald Trump changing his rhetoric, which means that MPs now think it's okay for them to change their rhetoric, regardless of what they actually believe on the matter. So, for example, my current MP, I sent him a letter, or an email rather, saying prescription of Palestine action, bad idea, etc., etc., etc. Really laid it out, long thing, very detailed. And he sent one back that exactly what you imagine it would be. And the line that stuck with me towards the end was that he said that he had no sympathy with anyone who protested or showed support for Palestine action, given what had, what's happened, what they know the law is. And I just thought that's such a snaky thing to say after you've said all of this stuff about how you're concerned too, really, really snaky liberal nonsense. And then a few days later, when it became clear that the tide was beginning to turn, he sent me another email where he basically said, having corresponded with you on Palestine action, and assured you that I share the growing outrage, blah, 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 blah. Now I am frustrated with the government's response thus far, and it just snivelly bullshit. And it's this kind of response to that where you have absolutely no backbone. All you're really interested in is your own career, your own place in the political elite. And so you will play with people's lives, even when someone lays it out to you very, very clearly. And it was, if I do say so myself, it was a well-constructed email. But then as soon, at the moment the tide begins to turn, that's when you begin to turn as well. And that's just, it's so new Labour, new Labour as well.
Yes.
It's so Labour under Starmer. It's just snivelling little weasels, doing what they do best, which is equivocating and beating about the bush, until they think it's safe to say give the slightest little bit of criticism to their own side for how it's been handled so far. And these people belong in The Hague, frankly. Anyway, sorry, that was an extended rant.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. We're seeing this shift in that political media ecosystem, right? But they can't just about turn. They can't just go, this is a genocide. The people that are protesting it are actually the good guys. That would be too obviously craven. So instead, you've seen a kind of a shift in some of the rhetoric and the way this stuff is talked about. And in particular, there's this kind of approach which basically says these people are scum, but calling them terrorists is a bit mean. Which I think we've seen across quite a lot of different kind of both politicians, political figures, and media platforms, is a kind of a growing concern from a kind of civil liberties perspective that doesn't actually take seriously the argument that's being made by these people, but instead says basically, well, we should, prosecute them as criminals, but it's probably going a bit far to call them terrorists.
I wonder if this is a good place to watch our first clip.
Yes, so Adam has sent me something. Adam, did you make yourself watch an entire episode of the Newsagents podcast?
I watched this episode 3 times. So
oh my,
that's how much it pissed me off.
That in itself is a mental health crisis if I've ever heard one.
It's certainly it's at least a symptom of one, isn't it?
Yes. So Adam, you've picked this out and you sent me some clips from it, and the reason we've gone for this is not because they're a particularly egregious example or particularly out there. For those of you who don't know, Newsagents is this kind of video podcast thing. They do the thing, so it's Emily Maitness, John Sopel, and Lewis Goodall, all of whom were fairly well-established journalists who left. I think, were they all at the BBC? I can't remember.
I think so, certainly at one time or another.
But they left the BBC or wherever they were to set up this podcast as a daily thing, with kind of designed to look independent. It's actually from Global Media, which is like a big media organisation in the UK. So it's not anywhere near as independent as I like to make it sound. But they have tried to give the impression of people that are prepared to kind of say things that your more traditional media won't say, give you the unvarnished truth, right? They're not particularly egregious with it, but it was just a very clear example, and probably a more helpful example than just picking on like the Daily Mail or the Telegraph or whatever fascist organ of choice you want to go for.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking like solidly liberal kind of thinking. I mean, I think they probably, there are disagreements that they have on there. I think probably the best one on there, which is not really saying that much, but the best one on there is probably Lewis Goodall, I think. His takes are slightly less shit than the other two. But they're,
bog standard liberals.
Yeah.
So we'll play the clips and we'll have a chat about why we've picked them out.
My suspicion is that of those 500 and however many people who were arrested following the protest, they want to see action about Palestine. There is a distinction there between kind of being concerned about everything that is unfolding in Gaza and actually supporting the group. And I suspect that many of those people are just really, really concerned that voices are not being heard, and you've got the right to protest, and prescribing groups that look like they are raising issues about Gaza shouldn't be banned. And I suspect they're less interested in some of the things that Palestine Action have done.
His voice.
Yeah, his voice is annoying, but what he's actually saying is even more annoying.
That's a tough call. I'm not going to lie to you.
Nah, man. No, I mean, look, issues really great, right? But at this point,
horrible.
yeah, lots of people do it. Posher types. That's just how they say it. What really annoyed me about that, though, is this idea essentially that people have gone to the point of getting arrested because they disagree with the prescription of Palestine Action. Mm-hmm. And he thinks that they're doing that essentially without a clue of what they're actually getting arrested for. His whole thing is, well, they're getting arrested essentially because they identify with the Palestinian cause, not because they agree with anything that Palestine Action have done. And I just think that's a brain dead take, frankly.
They're getting arrested for holding placards saying, I support Palestine Action.
Yeah.
How are you then claiming, well, I don't think they necessarily support Palestine action so much as they're concerned about free speech and what's happening in Gaza. And it's like, no, they are concerned about free speech and what's happening in Gaza. That's why they are holding placards saying they support Palestine action. And for legal reasons, obviously, we don't support Palestine action. You know,
terrible monsters,
awful
terrible
side to hold.
Yep.
So do not. Yep. We in no way recklessly encouraging you to enjoy Palestine action.
Yep, they should be taken to court and have the book thrown at them. And plasticine action, on the other hand,
they're good
love
guys.
Them.
We like them.
Love them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just mad, isn't it, as a take? And I don't think that John Sopel is lying about that he believes that to be the case. Right?
No, totally. Like, I think
disingenuous in any way.
I
think he genuinely can't process the idea that someone would look at people allegedly taking direct
action,
somewhere and doing a bunch of damage and think those people are the good guys because there's such an alien idea to the liberal worldview.
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is something that we're going to get into a little bit more, but like the idea that you would break the law, like to them is a moral failing. In fact, should we play the second clip? Because I think Lewis Goodall has a take that I don't think is entirely wrong, but does sort of play into this a little bit more.
And he'll say in a less annoying voice, so,
that's true. That is true.
Whether you think that prescription is right or not, what it has led to is a political optics problem, which is you end up, a really big problem, which is you end up with people who are protesting peaceably, people who clearly, when you look at them, you would not imagine would be involved in a terrorist group, however nice or unpleasant as that is to say, it is just a fact, being arrested en masse. And the critique that can be made, whether this is fair or not, is that the government is trying to oppress dissent and dissatisfaction about the Palestine issue, because what is in their name? Palestine action. And that is a big optics problem, political problem, if nothing else, for a government where this issue splits the Labour Party right down the middle.
He said issue as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to ignore it. I think on one level, I get that they're like a daily politics show, so they have to discuss the optics of the government. But there is part of me that just says there is an active genocide unfolding that the government that supposedly represents me is actively involved in supporting, and you want me to give a shit about optics.
Yeah.
It's just grotesque when you put it like that, isn't it?
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't think that he is wrong in what he's saying. I think there's a point there that he's making that is an accurate point. Yeah, there is an optics problem for the government there. But I think the fact that he hasn't really used that in any way to challenge what John Sopel has said is, I don't know if it shows that Lewis Goodall is in agreement with him on it, but I think it's a subtly different take, but it doesn't negate the previous take. And yeah, as you say, focusing on the optics for the government on this rather than the actual issue at hand. Again, just a really kind of just very, very shallow take. Very, very shallow take. Look, it might be that optics are essentially what ends up defeating the government on this. And like, yeah, however that happens, great. I hope the government are defeated on this. But I really wish that they would actually engage more robustly with what's actually going on here. And again, that is about the, yes, free speech, sure, but actually also the use of direct action to challenge and try and prevent a genocide that is happening right now and is actively supported both by the government and by the arms industry that the government allows to continue operating.
Yeah. And I think he kind of says it looks bad, particularly because the organisation is called Palestine Action, as though like people wouldn't be upset if the same thing had happened, but the organisation was called Cool Sexy Action. You know, like it's not a case of optics that it looks like they're shutting down the right to protest around Palestine, right? That is a statement of fact. The reason it looks like that's what's happening is because that is literally what is happening. And to turn that into a question of, oh, it doesn't look good because it suggests you might be doing that, is just absurd. Like, it doesn't look good because it's what they're doing. It's not about optics. It is about the actual reality that people are being arrested for exercising their right to free speech.
Exactly. Should we do third clip?
If we must.
It also potentially empowers exactly the sort of people who we would not want to empower. And I'm talking, for example, about far-right groups who are prescribed under the current legislation. Why? Because they get to say, look, you see, we told you. This is what the British state does. When it doesn't like something, when it's got a group that it doesn't agree with, it doesn't talk to them, it doesn't reason with them, it brooks no dissent. It allows no dissent. And that's true on the left and that's true on the right. And it legitimizes their idea that there are these people that are being prosecuted and that are being discriminated against and being oppressed and being driven underground. So I think that is the danger with it. It is that it makes it look like the British government will not allow dissent on something that it dislikes.
Again, there's the optics thing, right? Like,
yeah. But also, I mean, like, on some level, I'm glad that he is talking about the far right.
Mm-hmm.
But what he seems to be missing is, like, his argument is, well, the far right can say, well, do you see what they're doing? They're shutting down free speech. And that has been an argument that I have seen used by one or two people tangentially. I mean, I don't think they're involved in the far right. They're just sort of, gone along with some of the talking points. But this is not really how the far right views this.
It's burn the traitors, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. This is good. We this is what we should be doing. We need more of this. And yeah, okay, the Labour government isn't going to do that enough. We need to get rid of the Labour government. But it's good that they're burning the traitors.
Yeah, and they should have done earlier. Just Stop Oil should all be languishing in jail already, right? Like,
exactly, yeah.
Like, they should have prescribed Just Stop Oil. That should have been the first. Ideally, they'd have prescribed Extinction Rebellion and probably, like, beheaded Greta Thunberg on national television. Like, that's what the far right wants, right? Like, the idea that there are principled people on the far right advocating for a liberal notion of free speech is just nonsense. Like, yes, there are people on the far right who are manipulating liberals' love of so-called free speech in order to try and create space for their views. But the idea that there's a genuine commitment or even a desire to exploit this issue to say, see, they do it to everyone, we're just like Palestine Action, it does not reflect the reality that the majority of the far right are actually partaking in.
Yeah, which is not to say that no one on the far right ever uses that argument, because sure they do, but that's not their main argument. And as you say, this is very, very. This is just how liberalism interacts with the far right. This is exactly how it interacts with the far right, completely missing the point every single time.
Yeah, absolutely. The far right criticism of Labour on this and on migration at the minute is very clear. It's a good start, but you're never going to go far enough. We can finish the job. They don't fundamentally think they're going in the wrong direction. It's the speed of travel that they're upset by, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's obviously it's frustrating to just see the same mistakes being played out in real time, as if we haven't seen them happen again and again and again and again. Every single time the liberals make the same mistakes. They pander to the right, drag the Overton window further to the right, and it sends us in a really dangerous direction.
Shall we move to the fourth clip and hear from Ed Davey?
I don't know.
Never heard of him. Apparently he's the Leibdim's spokesperson, something. I don't know. Apparently he used to be famous at some point when the Lib Dems were still a party that anyone cared about or showed any interest in. So it's
he's a sir, though, so, man of the people.
But he says issues.
Couldn't the Home Secretary have been accused of double standards if she hadn't done this? I mean, for example, the Terrorism Act defines terrorism to include serious damage to property carried out for political ends. Now, there's no doubt that has occurred. These people, the people not with the placards, but the people who have attacked British military installations, they've broken into factories, they've damaged sites, even RAF bases. If someone associated with, say, ISIS did that, or Al-Qaeda did that, or a far-right group or the Football Lads Alliance or someone like this, these groups which have been proscribed did that, would say they were terrorists, wouldn't they?
Well, first of all, those actions by Palestine Action were completely wrong. They were acts of
Exactly what
crime,
they're gonna do.
and they could be and should be dealt with very, very hard, punished hard. But you don't need to use terrorism legislation to do that. And therefore, when you talk about Al-Qaeda and ISIS, I think everyone is really clear. They more than met the bar for being a terrorist organization. Were rightly prescribed.
UVF, Football Lads Alliance, far right. I mean, there are different sorts of groups who aren't as bad as those
not all
that
of them
you just mentioned.
Well, there's a lot of groups who need to be monitored and watched and punished when they commit crimes, but they aren't all designated as terrorist organizations under the terrorism legislation.
So it's not the main thing, but at the end, a little, and yes, we need the security services to really get involved in this stuff. Like, great, cool. Yeah, more spooks. That's what we need.
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting question that Lewis Goodall poses, right? That has a really interesting, good answer, which basically boils down to, you're absolutely right, that under the legislation, Palestine Action can be considered terrorist, and that's why it's a very bad bit of legislation, as was pointed out by Amnesty International and many other people, including prominent Lib Dems, at the time that this was a clear violation of civil liberties. And the answer from, it was Jack Straw, wasn't it, who put it through, was basically, yeah, but the good guys are always going to be in power in the country, so don't even worry about it.
Yeah, it's never going to be used in a way to go for groups that aren't. Yeah,
but it's absolutely true, isn't it? Palestine Action are guilty of being a terrorist group under that legislation.
100%.
That is inarguable. Yeah. That proves not that we should treat Palestine Action as terrorists, but that the legislation is an appallingly draconian piece of legislation that should never have been put through.
And look, Ed Davey, we should be clear here, is arguing that there should be a review of this and that they shouldn't be prescribed as a terrorist group. But his point is still that what they did was terrible. They broke into an RAF base and broke things, and that's terrible and criminal, and we should punish them very, very harshly. And it just has this, to me, when he was going on about that, it just had this really kind of, Daddy Davey, punish me kind of vibe to it.
Okay, first it was Little White Twinks, and now it's Daddy Davey. I'm worried about you, man.
I could be being turned,
But yeah, you're right. Like, actually, do you remember Ed Miliband saying, "Hell yes, I'm hard enough"? Very much that vibe. Like, we should punish them. Like, yeah, dude, come on, you'd wet your pants if you saw Direct Action in person. Like, let's not muck about. Like,
which is such for Ed Davey, it's such a not Ed Davey, Ed Miliband. It's such a come down from his dad. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, look, children of Marxists famously suck. Like, it's a problem. I don't know what it is, and yet children of wet liberals and worse turn out to just be also shitty. So I don't know. Go figure.
Clearly, what this is telling us is that everyone should be anarchist.
It's funny how everything says that to you, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, actually, Davey is really trying to say, I'm not pussyfooting around this. I'm still a hard man. I still want to punish them. Like, let's throw the book at these people. I just don't think they should be terrorists. Which I suppose on one level is an argument with some principle behind it. But
it's better than what Labour are saying, isn't it?
It's still just, actually, are you taking these people seriously, is what I come back to. Like, actually, they're not doing it because they fancied a jolly. They're doing this stuff, allegedly, because they believe that they have a moral duty to prevent our involvement in an active genocide.
Yeah, and this is just how liberals fundamentally misunderstand the point of direct action.
Yeah. We will pick up this conversation in a moment. But before we do that, Adam, would you like to hear about a Saint of the Week?
Saint of the Week.
The Saint of the Week that I've got for you this week, I have to say, I'm not 100% convinced by their role or by their place in the canon of Saint of the Week. I'll leave it up to you to make a judgment whether you accept them. But I will also be impressed if you can tell me the link that I'm going to draw to what we're talking about this week and the Saint of the Week.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about William Penn. Do you know William Penn?
Is he? Yeah, didn't he? Is he the I feel like I do know William Penn. Not
Founder,
the one who set up a Penn State University or something, right?
Not Penn State University. He set up Penn State full stop. He is the founder
Pennsylvania.
of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I remember, yeah. Quaker?
Absolutely a Quaker. Very good. So
yeah, Pennsylvania was a Quaker state, wasn't it?
Yeah. So he's born in 1644 to an admiral in the British Navy. And when he's 22, he becomes a Quaker. Funnily enough, he starts to get radicalised at Oxford University, which might be the first and last case of that ever happening. But there was a kind of unorthodox theologian who was fired, and Penn and a bunch of other students defended him publicly, got in a lot of trouble for it, and in the end, Penn's dad pulled him out of the university because he was like, that Oxford University, it's making you too radical, we've got to get you out of there.
Love it. Just needed some air horns for that.
So he converts to Quakerism. He gets arrested because being a Quaker is illegal. Quakers are not very popular because they believe heresy. Remove this filth. They believe that it's against the Bible to swear oaths, so they won't swear an oath of allegiance to the king,
which is just true.
Yeah, I'm relatively chill about swearing oaths, but not to a monarch. But they have the belief that all people are equal, so they won't pay additional respect to their superiors.
Communism.
They famously won't doff their hats to the noblemen and that sort of thing. He gets arrested, but his dad bails him out. But his dad is so pissed off with him for this Quaker bullshit that he kicks him out of the house and withholds his inheritance. So Penn ends up sofa surfing with a bunch of Quaker families, and he ends up being good buddies with George Fox, the founder of Quakerism, and they actually go on tour in Europe together.
Hang on. Is he the one? Do they fall out fairly catastrophically at one point, or is that someone else?
There is a falling out. So George Fox is very much simple faith, whereas Penn is quite a deep thinker, and there is a little bit of conflict in Quakerism between who they're going to follow. But ultimately, basically, the Cromwell government falls. There's a restoration, and there's some quite intense repression of Quakerism all over again, which basically makes everyone go, look, we'll deal with this at a later point. Let's try and avoid getting killed first. So basically, Penn writes some books, talks shit about Catholics and Protestants alike, and ends up in the Tower of London for blasphemy.
This needs even more air horns.
Yeah. They give him some pen and paper to write his retraction. He writes another book about how Quakerism is awesome. I did know this. Yeah. Within that book, he quotes 68 separate authors, all accurately, despite the fact that he has no books with him in the Tower of London, which is an extraordinary feat. Genuinely very impressive, man. Eventually, he's there for 8 months and just refuses, and they're like, oh, it's just a bit awkward having the son of an admiral here and all the rest of it. So he gets released. Immediately goes back to causing more trouble. He ends up in jail several more times. He eventually reconciles with his dying father. His dad actually kind of comes around a little bit. His dad is never a Quaker, but kind of respects his kind of intensity and commitment. And basically says to him, look, when I'm gone, you got to look after yourself, but do the right thing. But his dad is actually quite a big deal. He's kind of politically connected and well respected. And he basically gets the king and one of the dukes to agree to do their best to look after William Penn, which they agree to. And essentially, Penn then proposes to the king that he and a bunch of Quakers go to America and basically get out of their hair and start a new life there. And the king agrees and actually eventually gives Penn a huge slice of land, much bigger than Penn was expecting. He's completely shocked by how much he gets, and makes Penn actually one of the most powerful people in the New World at this time.
We'll just gloss over who actually had that land up to that point,
Well, so here's something really interesting and something that makes him cool, is that he was had really good relationships with the Native Americans. I don't know if it's the Lenape tribe, I think is I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he probably not.
I think probably, yeah.
But he signs a treaty with them that is a genuine, agreed on both sides treaty, includes rights for hunting and gathering for the tribe on the land that Penn now occupies. And he's quoted as saying that he wouldn't exploit natives or immigrants. I would not abuse his, as in God's, love, nor act unworthy of his providence, and so defile what came to me clean. So look, obviously, he is a settler-colonialist, ultimately. That is not a good thing to be. That's why he founded America, okay? That's not a good thing to do. This is why I'm not quite sure he fits stay in the week. But as these people go, he was incredibly, good to the Native American tribes. He unfortunately seemed to be pretty chill with slavery, though, which is crazy, by the way. Given everything else he believes and his approach to Native American, shocking how chill he is about slavery.
But it's interesting because obviously a big part of how slavery started was, I think it was Bartolome de las Casas arguing that they shouldn't, the colonists, particularly Spanish and Portuguese, I think, colonizers shouldn't enslave native people. And have you seen, maybe don't enslave native people, but there are some people over here in Africa who would make really good slaves. And of course, he later came to really regret that and argued and fought against slavery. But that was the argument. And that's basically how that started, how that got a moral case to do that. And so from there, you end up with this case being made. And this is, the birth of both racism and race as a concept, right? Where the argument is made that essentially black people are either a lesser class of human or aren't human at all. Mm-hmm. So you can see how he ended up in that place. I'm really not sure I'm comfortable with this guy as Saint of the Week,
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, and I'm not sure we'll decide at the end. Something else interesting about him is he sets up, so it's a Quaker colony. And despite the fact that he loves criticizing every religion that isn't Quakerism, he's incredibly tolerant of other faiths. And actually, Pennsylvania only gets called Pennsylvania after he dies. It's Sylvania first, hence Sylvanian families. That's where it comes from. There you go. But various persecuted minorities, including Jewish people from all over Europe, Amish, Mennonites, Huguenots, Lutherans, Catholics. There were only treason and murder were punishable by death in the new colony, which at the time there were over 200 crimes that were punishable by death in England. So that was a huge step forward.
Treason is such a cool crime, thoe.
Yeah, sure. War pro treason. Don't get me wrong.
One of my favourites, yeah.
But again, just this step forward. And actually, in his treatment of slaves, he thought that basically they should be treated a lot better, and he did.
Not going to count that one as a win. To be honest.
It's bad, but he is ahead of his time in a lot of ways. He continues to kind of argue for various what you probably call liberal causes, but obviously at the time these were quite radical ideas. In the 17th century, he was a man quite ahead of his time, and when the US does eventually kind of become a nation of its own, a lot of his ideas are incorporated. But even at that point, many of his ideas are considered too radical to be incorporated into the new nation. Something quite interesting. The reason that I bring him up, and the reason I stumbled across him, is that at one of his trials, he is arrested and charged with basically preaching in public, which is a crime at the time because he was preaching Quakerism. But the jury refused to find him guilty.
Love it. And
the jury were all told by the judge, you're going to jail, and they put a huge fine, and until they paid it, they were not allowed out of jail. and one member of the jury refused to pay the fine. And eventually it went, I think, to the High Court as an equivalent, and it was found that he couldn't be punished for refusing to give a verdict the judge wanted. And this is where the concept of jury nullification comes from. This is its precedent in English law, that the jury has the right to make a decision independent of the judge, and that it can refuse on the grounds of its conscience to not convict someone even if they believe they are technically guilty. Which is important because the reason most people believe that Palestine action has been prescribed is the government are scared that if they go to court on the existing charges, the jury will choose to do jury nullification and refuse to register a guilty verdict on the basis of conscience. And that by designating them a terrorist organisation, they essentially put increased pressure on the jury and bypass a lot of the jury stuff entirely. And it all goes back to William Penn being tried well before he's founded Pennsylvania, being tried for preaching Quakerism in public, and the one brave person who refused to pay the fine and went to the point where they were forced to concede that juries are independent of judges. So, Adam, your ultimate decision, given that he also was heavily involved in establishing jury nullification, does William Penn get into our Saint of the Week pantheon?
Look, I mean, you've already done him as Saint of the Week now, so I don't have a choice really but to say yes. But I think there are some pretty big caveats there in that. Yeah, okay, he was ahead of his time, but there were people at that time who were anti-slavery, even people who were anti-colonization. Not least, enslaved people and colonized people themselves,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm quite happy to put him in a lesser pantheon of Saint of the Week, some sort of Saint of the Week purgatory, or put an asterisk by his Saint of the Week like they do with sports competitions where everyone knows that the people who won cheated.
We could say he's on the road to canonization.
Yeah, that's good. Let's be more Catholic about this. Yeah. So that was the Saint of the Week. And a lovely segue that I brilliantly prepared is to talk a little bit about why Palestine action got prescribed and how actually a lot of the liberal media seem really uninterested in talking about the fact that they are prescribed because the government believes they cannot win a fair trial against them. And I think, there's a lot of chat about the principle of free speech, but I actually think the principle of trial by jury is really what is a question here. Yes, the right to protest is being curtailed, but there's a reason that Defend Our Juries was the name of the protest group, right? And it's recognizing that this prescription is an attempt to fundamentally undermine the right to trial by jury of your peers.
Yeah. And it's tricky because the right to trial by jury is, again, it's a liberal right, it's not a particularly radical thing, but it's better than the state just being able to decide to throw the book at you, lock you away, and you're guilty.
Yeah, and I think actually there are certain liberal principles and reforms that we might want to go beyond, but that are foundational to a more radical approach to how we set up society, right? And I think, as you say, there are more radical ways of approaching things, but as a starting point, trial by jury is a really effective and important safeguard against judicial overreach.
I think I would struggle to call it a safeguard. I would say that it is something that, because it feels like safeguard it gives it too much credit.
Right.
I would say that it is something that can be used to some extent to prevent the worst excesses of judicial overreach. But, there's still plenty of judicial overreach that happens in the system we have, which is one, at least in, Crown Courts, of trial by jury.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of liberation theology idea around seeing things for how they really are, and how the poor, with the obvious caveat that the poor is a wider category than it might sound, but that the poor are able to see the true reality of the way things are. By being on the sharp end of the system, they're able to perceive more clearly the system. And I think I'm trying to argue for the people who have been arrested, either for being in Palestine Action or for supporting them, are people that have actually seen clearly what's going on. Whereas the political and media establishment, like I said earlier, I think the guys in those Newsagents clips absolutely believed what they were saying, right? I think they weren't disingenuous at all, but they have fundamentally missed the key point, the actual reality of what is happening, because they're not capable of seeing the truth. And so when they're talking about or optics, or even, saying like people should be arrested, but this is a bit too far, they're not actually seeing the fundamental conflict that is being played out. They're only thinking about it in terms of kind of tribal party politics and electoral politics.
And this is the kind of one of the fundamental issues with certainly contemporary liberalism when it gets onto politics, is that it sees politics in a very, very narrow way. Politics is, what happens in the House of Commons. It's what happens with politicians. It's what happens every 4 or 5 years with an election, and maybe, even sort of local politics, local elections, that kind of thing. They do not extend that to just broader concepts of how we organize as a society.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think you therefore get to the point where so much inane, pointless chatter that passes for media coverage of this stuff and passes for political comment on this stuff.
Flying dangerously close to criticising our own podcast here.
The difference is we don't claim to be anything other than inane, pointless chatter, right? Like, we don't have a particularly highfalutin view of our role in the societal ecosystem, right? We are...
It's great to know where we stand, Ben. I'm really happy about that, yeah.
But yeah, I just think there is something... And it ends up from a position where it's about principles, the principle of defending free speech, principle of the right to protest, it very quickly becomes a very unprincipled position of we should punish these people. There was this thing, I'm sure we've mentioned it before, but, a number of MPs went from voting for prescription to celebrating the suffragettes in Parliament on the same day.
I think it was the other way around. They celebrated the suffragettes first and then voted for prescription. But and there's pictures of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the point is not to say, I don't think the point is to say, well, the suffragettes were actually the good guys, unlike Palestine Action or anything. I think the point is to say very clearly the suffragettes were terrorists under the definition being proposed.
And they were bigger terrorists than Palestine Action were, because they 100%. Bombed things and actively harmed people. They went for people. Palestine Action do not do that, even if you account for the fact that at least one of them has been charged with violent disorder or something because they allegedly assaulted a police officer. That is not Palestine Action's tactics. That is not what they actively encourage you to do. Suffragettes did.
I thought you were just going to say, but police officers aren't people, so that doesn't count. No, yeah, absolutely. And that's not to criticise the suffragettes, but to recognise that we all instinctively understand that there are times when more extreme measures are taken, right? Like where it is reasonable and proportionate.
We do, but they don't, because they are not seeing. I mean, it's this typical thing of supporting every political action that happened in the past and led to something good, but not the ones that are happening now. Every protest movement that happened in the past, every direct action movement that happened in the past for things that we now hold, to be part of what it is that makes our system good, if indeed you believe that, they will support that. And it's the same old thing every single time of essentially liberal capture of radical action narratives, that kind of thing, and watering them down. They do the same every time. They did it with Martin Luther King. They do it with Malcolm X.
Mandela.
Right, yeah. And look, it's not to say that there aren't criticisms of any of those characters, sure, but they were a lot more radical than these people like to think.
And as I say, I just think about the liberation theology principle of seeing the world clearly and naming it as such. And I think that not necessarily on purpose, but that our media is an impediment to that rather than an aid in that. Because the reality is, actually, if you see the world clearly and you see that there is a genocide being committed with our active support, and you name it as such, what then becomes reasonable, proportionate, acceptable in response to that goes beyond writing letters to the MP.
But not, of course, that we would at any point encourage any of the measures that Palestine Action have taken.
Of course not.
No,
Absolutely not.
No,
Disgraceful people.
Yeah.
But if all you can say is yeah, we should punish these people, then you are obfuscating the genuine ethical question that is at the heart of this, which is, what is it acceptable to do to save thousands of lives?
And by the way, a legal principle that was set and still just about in law is that there are times when it is legal to ostensibly break the law to prevent the law being broken in a worse way, i.e., in this case, a genocide. And obviously, as we've mentioned before, one Keir Starmer defended a group that broke in previously to a military base to prevent aircraft going to commit acts of genocide, and Keir Starmer won that case. But it's interesting how there's been such a massive about face on that, isn't it, when it serves his government?
And I guess the question for those as Christians is, in the face of a genocide supported by my country,
ain't my country,
but it is, whether you're happy about that or not.
I'm being facetious. Yeah. I mean, look, it's not something I lay claim to because I dislike the entire concept. But yes, I recognise that. Yeah, I live on the land claimed by this political entity. And
I was going to say your taxes go towards that, but obviously that doesn't necessarily. I suppose you might pay VAT occasionally.
All right. There's no need for this dig, is there? Really? Blimey.
But yeah, actually.
Like patreon.com/bread and rosaries.
But what is Christ's call to you in a moment when you see clearly what is being done in your name? And, I'm not, even joking aside, I'm not saying that the call for every single person is to go and undertake direct action. But what I am saying is that to say, well, actually we should punish those bad people, but it's a bit far, isn't it? Is if you see clearly what is happening and you have the ethical call of the gospel laid upon you, that is clearly an insufficient response.
I mean, we've said this kind of thing before, but the verse that came to my mind was render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and render unto God what is God's. You brought up the idea of taxes, right? And we can expand that concept with that verse. What is it we should render unto Caesar in this situation, in this case? What does rightfully belong to Caesar right now?
Yeah. And these, I think, are the serious moral issues that conversations about optics and electoral politics and whether or not, this particular group should be labelled terrorists or not. As important as it is to be on the right side of that last question, it almost obscures the real fundamental question. How does one act ethically in the midst of a genocide? And actually, if you see the world for as it is, see the truth that we are living in, that is a question that should shake you to your core. It shakes me to my core. How do I, cook some dinner, walk the dog, watch a bit of telly, go out and play some sport, enjoy my life, knowing that in my name right now a genocide is being committed. How do I do that? How can I do that? But what else can I do? And actually, yeah, I think that is my fundamental problem, is that all the inane chat about optics, electoral politics, the rights and wrongs of whether we designate them this or we just chuck them in jail for life for doing property damage, that's not the big question. The big question is, how do we live our lives in the midst of this horror? What is our call to do?
And this is the thing, that whenever we have these conversations, it, as you say, can be very easy to get sidetracked by issues that really aren't about the big thing, to talk about optics and that kind of thing, when we should be always returning it to the central issue that a genocide is being committed on people, and on people who have been colonized, whose lands have been colonized and their homes have been stolen over the last 75 years.
I think we're probably just about out of time. Solidarity forever. Free Palestine. Do what Christ is calling you to do. Don't think there's better advice I can give than that, is there? Certainly not with the legal prohibitions in place.
No, nor would we.
No, absolutely not. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. We had a little bit of a break because, everything goes wrong, doesn't it? You know the story. You know how it goes.
Yeah, people get it by now. This is not this is not a professional outfit.
There was at least 3 members of the podcast / close relatives and members of the podcast in hospital in the last month. So
yeah, literally.
It's actually more than that, but we won't go in. Like, the number's higher, actually, now. I'll calculate it in my head. Nonetheless, but yeah, thank you very much for sticking with us. We love to hear from you. So if you have thoughts, questions, suggestions, ideas, queries, send them in to us. All the contact details are on breadandrosaries.com. We love it if you could review us on your Apple Podcast or your Spotify's. And if you have a few pretty pennies you want to chuck our way, there is a Patreon that will be on the website as well. Adam, where in the world can people find you?
You can find me most places: TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky, at Commie XIAN.
Thank you very much for listening, everyone. Thank you for tolerating talking to me, Adam. And we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.
See you later.